saddest parts of the season coming to an end
I know.
might have been that we don't get to see this guy anymore. It was so fun during the playoff run. Jon Morosi was here in Seattle. We had him out to the set. He was with us in person. JP, there's a lot to talk about after the Mariners season comes to an end, but it's going to stink not seeing you anymore.
Well, listen, first and foremost, I'm just grateful for what's been an amazing season and the time I was able to spend with everybody from Seattle sports at the ballpark. The great job that Trevor did with the videos for social and the opportunity to help there. So just want to say, first of all, how grateful I am that you included me and invited me into the group. I got to see Rick Riz in the radio booth, which was really special to see. Of course, he threw out the first pitch there for Game 5, which was really cool. I know for all of us who have enjoyed his work and get to be his friends too, which is pretty cool. So just a month of many special memories. I was actually just reflecting on that, but before we started this interview, just wanted to say thank you to everybody listening and certainly everybody at the station for making me feel so welcome. And here's to another season of memories here ahead in 2026.
Well, it's fitting because you started off here, right, JP?
That's right. No, I was just looking over some photos. My outstanding field producer Jenna Vanderwright had done a great job of taking photos of our interviews before the games and sometimes after the games on MLB Network, and just some really beautiful images that I'll be sharing on X here in a little while, just to reflect on some pretty cool conversations. And you're exactly right. 20 years ago, I was a backup beat writer behind John Hickey at the great Seattle Post-Intelligencer. So to be able to cover that team in 05, which had many great personalities and people, but not necessarily a great record, but was the foundation of a lot of my baseball reporting in the years since. And certainly then I moved on to cover the Tigers back in my home state of Michigan. So for there to be a Mariner-Tiger series that went to the maximum, 15 innings in Game 5 was special, and then to see a 7-game LCS was very memorable too. And certainly I'm never going to forget the way the ballpark sounded with Gino's home run, and the atmosphere there that day was a lifetime memory that I'm certainly going to cherish.
Well, JP, there's a lot to talk about with kind of the micro decision of that 7th inning and that pitch and the at-bat, and then kind of the macro of the entire series. I guess starting with the obvious question, what did you make of that move and then all the fallout that happened after the Bizardo Springer at bat?
Sure. So I go back and say this, Mike, that it's difficult to look at that pitch in isolation. The butterfly effect is real in terms of decisions that were made. And honestly, I go back to Game 6, and I was wondering aloud, the moment when things got a little confusing for me was when Brash came into that game, when the Mariners were down. And you looked around and said, where are we seeing the cause to use your best bullpen assets to win one of those two games? And it was my sense at the time, and we were all talking about it in the press box, is at that point, I think it was prudent, certainly try to keep the game close, but there were a handful of guys that I really didn't think should be in the game at that point, because you want to preserve their ability to make the maximum impact on the game the following day. And so I agree with those that say, as a very wise baseball person put it to me, the pennant got away in the 7th inning without Munoz, Brash, or Spire having their say. At the end of the day, that's what you saw in terms of the way that things sort of unfolded there, in terms of it in a big prominent way. That you really didn't get a chance for the guys that you had scripted to influence the outcome when it really mattered most. And I said, if Brash doesn't pitch in Game 6, are you able to get him into the game earlier in Game 7? Probably. And the other piece was, when you look at how you map out 27 outs, I think that it's fair to say, and I said this in my immediate reaction video, that Kirby was probably removed too soon, and then Wu was removed too late. When Wu got the final out of the 6th, my sense at that time was he had done his job, and the way that he brought that inning to a conclusion allowed you to bring in Spire to face Barger to start the 7th. That's where my mind was. And then at least you have some combination of Spire and Brash in the 7th, then leading into Munoz for likely 2 innings. The other piece of all this, and this is like why baseball is such a fascinating sport to look at over a 7-game series. Bizzardo said, I threw that same pitch to Springer the previous day, and it was a ground ball, and I got out of it. And that's true. It was basically the same pitch. But this, again, is the peril in going to the same relievers against the same hitters. To some degree, it's unavoidable. But the point was that happened in a game with someone that you trusted enough to pitch in Game 7. You had him in a minus game in Game 6. Why? And that to me was the question. So it wasn't so much that, was it a great pitch? No, it wasn't a great pitch. It wasn't a horrible pitch, but it wasn't a great pitch. And so I blame Bizzardo less than I sort of call attention to probably a suboptimal pitching plan in its totality over Game 6 and Game 7. By the way, there were plenty of decisions that Dan Wilson made earlier in the series that people had criticized that I was actually fine with. And even the John Schneider decision, by the way, was roundly booed in Toronto in Game 5, which led to the Geno homer. So it's, on some level, a lot of this is inevitable. Whichever team loses, you're going to be second-guessed. I just thought that it's less about, oh my gosh, what went on that pitch and why did he throw that pitch in that spot. There was a series of decisions that happened that I would say starting around the middle part of Game 6, leading into that point of Game 7, that I just think probably could have been handled differently. And again, I realize that Kirby, maybe there was a little reluctance of having him go beyond where he went, but goodness, his pitch count was in a reasonable position. And there, to me, there's a very finite number of pitchers. When you're looking at a Game 7, there's a finite number of pitchers that if you're mapping it out, again, I've never been a major league manager, but this is how I would look at it. Basically, your card should have like 4 names on it. Basically, these 4 guys are going to touch the ball. And that's it, unless we get to the 10th inning. These 4 guys, that's the plan. And you pick those 4 guys and you go with it. Now, in Dan Wilson's defense, Brian Wu undoubtedly was one of those 4 guys. And so there are many worse decisions that you could make than having Brian Wu start the 7th inning. So that in and of itself was not a huge catastrophe. But darn it, if you look at the big picture and say, if you get Kirby through one more inning, or if the 5th inning is like a Kirby and Gabe Spire combination, then Wu starts the 6th and gets the 6th and the 7th, and everything is different. It's just, there were a lot of different ways to get to 27 outs that did not involve Bizzardo facing the top of the lineup with that much traffic on the bases in the 7th inning.
JP, we had Doug Glanville on, I think it was last week, Mike, or maybe 2 weeks ago, but I found him to be like very wise. And there are a couple of, and one of the things that he said, and what we're talking about is just, he said that it's a culture, the baseball fans, it's a culture of second guessers. And
sure,
that this is the one, and this is maybe what's cool about baseball, right? I mean, now it's kind of annoying that you have people weighing in and, oh, he should have done this and that, and how much of that is hindsight and everything. But it is very cool that, like, you can kind of be the manager, right? I would have done this, or he could do this. There's so many options, and there's not – I mean, every once in a while you'll go in the NFL, like, yeah, maybe they should have gone for it on 4th down or whatever. But, like, this comes down to, like, a specific 2 people and, a pitch specifically, that you can actually weigh in on because of all the stats and everything that are available these days.
Right. And by the way, on the flip side of this, and I think that as much as Mariner fans are still replaying this and probably will keep replaying this for a while, the Jays fans had their own moments. The Jays fans, if you were certainly at the ballpark in Game 6 or Game 7, Game 6, when Schneider came out to remove Trey Savage, he was booed mercilessly because of what had happened in Game 5. And I mean, it was a boo. It was a big time boo. Yeah. And then so Schneider is booed all the way out on the walk because the fans wanted to let him know that A, they didn't like what happened in Game 5, and B, they didn't want to have Trey Savage taken out of the game. So boo all the way out, and then Savage walks off the mound. Cheers, crazy, right? Just like going nuts. And then the next game, of course, the Jays win the pennant, and Schneider's up there, and he's talking to the crowd. The crowd's like, "Yeah, we got the best manager. He's the best." So I mean, you have to understand, as the great Todd Jones said to me when I was covering the Tigers as a young beat writer. He said, and this is so true. He said, "John, we work in a boo cheer business." It's true. It's a boo cheer business.
Yeah.
It's true for all of us that work in. I mean, it's definitely true for the players, but true to an extent for all of us that even work on the conversational media side of things. We all, it's a boo cheer business for all of us, and so I think that what I was also getting around to saying was John Schneider did something really unconventional that I think has been lost in the shuffle a little bit, which was he had Chris Bassett, a starting pitcher who was not necessarily a principal reliever in the Jays bullpen during the course of this postseason. He's warming up in the bottom of the 7th with Springer batting. The rally builds, and ostensibly, basically, Bassett was told by the bullpen coach, okay, you're going to go in, understanding that your job is to keep the game close, assuming that the Jays were still going to be down in the game, and your job is to basically hold the game right here and give us a chance to come back late. Then all of a sudden, the Springer home run happens. The place is going bonkers, and the Jays did not change their plan. They let Bassett come out there and face the middle part of the lineup with now a 1-run lead, which I was saying to myself, this is unique. This was probably not the plan. Okay, this is probably not the way they scripted it at 2:00 in the afternoon, and yet it works. And he throws that 72-mile-an-hour curveball to Gino that I still cannot believe. That in and of itself was a pitch that almost could not have been expected. It was a strike. It was a borderline strike. It was a strike. And I think Gino was just in disbelief. And then later on in the 9th inning, by the way, Hoffman is throwing down 2-0. He threw a chase slider to Julio that Julio swings over, and he also got him to chase at 3-2 with Raleigh on deck. I mean, these are just ridiculously bold decisions by Toronto that worked out. And again, does it make John Schneider a smarter manager than Dan Wilson? Not necessarily. His moves in the end worked in Game 7 and Dan's didn't. And I think it's also important to point out that these decisions that Dan made, these were not just heat of the moment, oh my gosh, I have to do this, and I'm going to change the script in the middle of Game 7. These were all thought out. That's the process works where Pete and Dan, and I'm sure the front office, they're going through different analytical decisions about, okay, here are the lanes that we like and match up well with their relievers. Again, I just think that they were a little, the Mariners, the seeds of the loss in Game 7 started by spending, I thought, too many precious assets in free looks and trying to chase and keep Game 6 close when honestly you didn't really have to do that. And I think that is part of the subtext of what happened in Game 7 that is, I think, has been lost a little bit. And that's a strategic, big picture choice about how you want to chase a game. I just thought it wasn't necessary in the case of Game 6.
Okay, so JP, outside of just Game 7 itself, in the totality of a 7-game series where you have to win 4 of them, why did the Blue Jays ultimately win this series?
Deeper lineup that did a better job of making contact. And again, I'm glad you framed it that way, Mike, because yes, ultimately the pennant was decided in Game 7. I think the Mariners lost it in the Games 3 and 4 at home, because you had an absolute command of the series, and it wasn't. And those games, I want to be clear about this. Those games were won more than they were lost. The Jays were just a better team. They took really good at bats in Games 3 and 4, and this is where the issue, in my view, was the separation. That the Jays had the ability to start rallies with the bottom third of their lineup, which never really happened for the Mariners. The Game 7, I thought their at-bats as a team, and I think Dan said this, and I believe he was correct, the at-bats overall for the Mariners actually were pretty good. I think better in Game 7 than they were in Game 6. Obviously, they had the lead for a big portion of the night. But you go back to Game 3 and 4. The heroes for the Jays: Jimenez, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, Ernie Clement, Barger to an extent. Barger obviously was a hero in Game 6. The analogous players on the Seattle roster did not have as much of an impact as those players did for Toronto. And again, we often hear it in the final analysis of a series, and it's true. Go back and look at the numbers. If you want to say the superstars canceled each other out, more or less, I guess you could say that. I mean, Vladdy was better than anybody else in the series. In terms of production, he was just the best hitter in the series. Naylor had an amazing series. So if you want to just say stars, like Vladdy versus some combination of Naylor and J-Rod and Raleigh, okay, basically the one, sort of the three, that was like the superstar level. Overall impact probably roughly was equivalent, one and then the three. But then after that group, the Jays were just a better team. They were a deeper lineup. That and here's the crucial part: put the ball in play more often. And that's something where we've had many conversations on this show over the last couple of years about the need to put the ball in play a bit more often. The Mariners were obviously competitive enough in that regard. I think that the Jays will probably be a tougher matchup, honestly, for the Dodgers than what the Mariners would have been, specifically because of their ability to put the ball in play. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. had more home runs in the ALCS than he had strikeouts. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of player that will give the Dodgers a tougher time. The Dodgers are still the favorites. They should be. They're an amazing team. But that probably, for me, is the last piece of the equation for the Mariners on the offensive side, getting a little more contact. But let's be clear here. Let's not forget. They win Game 5 because Suarez has the game of his life, and their best player in the series was Naylor, I thought, best hitter, and they're both free agents. You got some work to do just to get back to being as good as you were right now. I mean, Naylor was my vote. When in the middle of the game, I'll say here among friends, okay, conversation, ALCS MVP, what are you going to do? I basically let it be known that, at least from where I was sitting, my vote, I said if the Jays win, it's Guerrero, and if the Mariners win, it's Naylor. That was my opinion. So that's what I saw. And again, he's a free agent, and so is Gino. So there's some work to do. Now, the pitching side of things, they've got plenty of pitching for next year. You expect Hancock to take a step. You expect Evans to take a step. They believe that Emerson can maybe make an impact on the team next year. The team's in a really good position. This is not, oh my gosh, the window's closed and we're going to weep now for the entire winter. That's not it. But they've got some work to do to just get back to being as good as they were in Game 7, which obviously, as we know, wasn't quite good enough.
Yeah, and JP, to your point, I mean, and that's what we were looking at the numbers about, their offense. They were number one in hits, and they had the second fewest strikeouts during the regular season, the Jays. Now, here's the question of the day, and we got like 3 minutes because I know that there's going to be some arguing and screaming and yelling and all that. But Charlie Furbush is in studio with us, and he agreed with me that you want to root for the team that beat you in the World Series because that makes you look better. It justify, okay, that's why, and that you should root for Toronto. Now there's the emotional fans that are like, there's no way, I hate them. Of course we don't root for the Toronto Blue Jays. But Charlie and I believe that, and I don't know if maybe this is an ex-athlete thing, but that you root for the team that beat you because it makes it look justified and makes it look like, okay, I guess that's the reason why we lost.
Yeah, I agree. Yes.
3-1,
Dave, you're right.
Lefko. 3-1.
Dave, you're right. Dave, I'm sorry, Mike. Dave is correct about this. That's just, he's right. He's right. That's. I totally agree with you on that. I mean, there's probably some deep down part, and this is kind of really old-fashioned. You got to root for your league. We're proud American League fans. That that on some level, you still would do that in the All-Star game. I guess you still do that in the World Series as well. But I agree with you. I think, listen, the deeper you go into the winter, and certainly I've been around teams that went to the World Series and lost. In the moment, you're frustrated. And that's understandable. Don't try to run from it. It's supposed to hurt. Right. And by the way, one of the more formational and foundational experiences for me as a baseball person was I was in college in 2003 in Boston. Red Sox lost to the Yankees on the Aaron Boone home run. Of course, they had that game. They had a 3-run lead in that game in the 8th inning, 5 outs to go. Pedro Martinez, Grady Little, the whole story. You know it well. And so I was watching that in my dorm as a senior in college, and I was supporting the Red Sox at that point because I was in college there and I was around it, and that seemed to be what I was in that environment, right? And then the next year, I was by then graduated, and I was a journalist covering it. And of course, the Red Sox come back from 3-0 down, and they beat the Yankees. They go on to win the World Series for the first time in 86 years. So what I would say is that winter, I remembered it just being so passionate and so intense in Boston. Again, I was at that point still going through my senior year of college, and so that is what I would encourage Seattle fans to maintain. Being a baseball fan is a 12-month out of the year. It is not an activity. It is a vocation. To use the Latin word, a vocale. It is your calling. Okay, and so remain engaged. Talk with us on the show about what the Mariners should do, and stay involved. Stay engaged with this. Maybe you're not quite staying up till all hours of the night and going through bullpen permutations. But this is a 12-month-a-year calling, Mariner fans. And you know this, but this is stay engaged with it. I remember, I'll tell you a quick story. As a senior in college, I was a clerk at the Boston Globe. And I was at a Celtics game to write a sidebar. It was like the Celtics were playing the Nets. I can't remember who exactly they were playing. But I was there doing a sidebar on the Celtics game, writing about basketball. And then on the Jumbotron is shown Theo Epstein sitting next to Keith Folk, who was at that time a free agent closer. And so Theo's on the Jumbotron, and my very primitive cell phone, 2003, rings, and it's the sports editor of the Boston Globe, Don Squire, saying, "Morosi, now you have to find Theo and write about that. You're not going to write about basketball anymore because the bigger story is in front of you, and it's the Red Sox." And so I had to chase down Theo Epstein and Keith Folk. Like, where were they at sitting in Boston Garden? I had to find them and interview them as quickly as I could and write a story about it. And so that is the level of fanaticism that I'm expecting from the Mariner fans, that if your version of Theo Epstein and Keith Folk, if you see Jerry DiPoto hanging out with Munetaka Murakami in Seattle, there's your story and there's your passion, because it's now a 12-month out of the year calling for the great fans of Seattle.
Well, JP, thank you for everything. Again, wish we were still doing this in person. That was a lot of fun when you were here. Perhaps
we'll check in maybe during the hockey season.
No, he's still with us. Yeah, he's still with us, but I just meant in person.
Yeah,
we don't get to do it in person again this year. So, John, a lot of fun. Enjoy the World Series. We'll stay engaged. We'll talk to you sometime in the near future. We'll get our schedules in line.
I appreciate it, and by the way, that becomes the new T-shirt of the off season. I saw some great T-shirts during the run, including some with words on it that my kids can't repeat. but this is the more PG rated. Stay engaged, Seattle. It's maybe not quite the same spicy T-shirt, but that's at least my exhortation to all of you.
Less fun,
you know what I'm gonna get? I'm gonna get one that says "It's supposed to hurt." I love that. That was very good.
Yeah. I remembered walking to class the next day in Boston, and of course that had 86 years of history, and people were just it was raining. They were just trudging up. It was not a good vibe. And so I've been there. I've experienced it. There are brighter and better days ahead.
John, thanks. We'll talk to you next week.
All the best, guys. Looking forward to it. Thanks so much.